Okay, so let's move on to some of the other options that we do have available in Krunker. We're going to take a look at creating a ramp, and we're also going to take a look at creating a ladder, as well as changing the sky color and just the overall light color, exporting and importing. So first things first, let's actually cover exporting and importing, because it's really the default kind of save function that we have. Well, it's the only way we can actually save our map, so it's quite important to make sure that you actually do this. All right, so let's go ahead and export our map. Our first things first, make sure that you do have a proper name for it, right? And down the bottom left-hand corner, we're going to go ahead and we're going to press the export map button. Now the export map button, once we click it, is actually going to write out a text file. Inside of that text file is going to be a bunch of code, and that is what we copy and paste back in to load our map. Now I strongly encourage you guys to export your map every time you guys change something. Honestly, the way I work is how much am I willing to lose is how often I save. It's that simple. So export your map regularly. It's not uncommon for me to get up to about 50, 60, 70 versions of a map as I'm kind of working through it and just altering things, saving it out, and then testing it that way. So let's go ahead and click on that now. So I'm going to come down to the export map button, click on that. Boom, there we go. It's gone ahead and it's saved out a test.txt. Obviously it says test because the name of my map is called test. So if you were to call it like hardcore parkour, then it would be saved out as hardcore parkour.txt. Alrighty. So that's that. Now it actually saves it out to your downloads folder. Now I'm talking about PC here. I don't use Mac at all. So it will save it to your download folder. So if you browse to your download folder now, which is exactly what I'm going to do, you can see inside of my download folder, I have test. Now if I go ahead and double click on that, it'll open up a text file like so, and it will basically have all the information about your map in there. All we need to do now is go ahead and, all we need to do now to load it back in, let's just say that you've closed down your browser and you want to, you've gone to bed, and next day you want to work on it again. You open up the text file, you copy the entire text, Control A, Control C, jump over to the Krunker editor, and I'm just going to go ahead and just refresh this. I've got a brand new one. Come down to the import button, click on that. Up here, where it says Krunker.io saves, paste, copy and paste map here. Pretty simple. Paste it in, press OK, and we now have our map imported back in. All right, let's go ahead and create our very first ramp. It's probably something everyone has the biggest issue with when it comes to actually, I guess, creating their map. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually just duplicate out this ground plane. I'm just going to give us like another area to kind of ramp up to, like so. Okay, I'm just going to move my spawn point out and over the way, just so when I create it. Oh, okay, in the center of your world, if you do have this little X here, right, that's a little camera that spins around at the start of the map. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that up like so. All right, let's go ahead and create our very first ramp. So I'm going to come up to ramp, click on that, and all of a sudden we get this new cube that appears in our map. But the biggest difference between this cube and the other cubes is it has this little pink arrow sitting here. Now that arrow is actually telling us which way the ramp is going up, right? Unfortunately, the editor isn't good enough to display the actual ramp itself, and as a result, it shows us in the form of what's called a bounding box, which just looks like an actual cube. So this arrow here is the up direction of the ramp. You can kind of visualize the direction of the ramp by looking at the bottom corner. So this is where the bottom is going to be based on the arrow, and see the arrow is pointing to the right. The ramp is going to be going up this way like so. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm just going to move this across, scale it out, make sure that it's nice and flush up against that wall. Now ramps are notoriously glitchy, so be a little bit aware. Can you see this block here? With it being flush up against this ramp, you can actually glitch into this cube by kind of crouching and going on an angle along this edge here, which is an absolutely pain in the ass to deal with, but just be aware that it will cause that issue. So quite often I like to frame my ramps with a bit of a wall. but I'll explain that later. Alright, so let's make sure that our ramp is facing the right way. So see this arrow, how it's facing off to the right? If I just go ahead and test this map real quick. Okay, you can see that's our ramp. It's going up in the direction of the arrow that we just had inside of our editor. Now ramps are really glitchy, so be aware if I run underneath this ramp, it's going to instantly teleport me to the top of it. Alright, so it's a bit busted that way. So just be aware that that is an issue you have to deal with. So let's go ahead and change it into the right direction. So I'm going to go back to the editor now. It's not even sitting flush on the ground. So alright, so to change the direction of our ramp, we come down to the object config. Okay, and in the object config, we have a few options. We have visible, which basically turns its visibility on and off. It still functions as a wall. It is just invisible to the eye. We've got collidable, which basically makes it that you can see the cube, but you can run straight through it. It will not act as a ramp. It will not impede your movement. It's non-collidable. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on. Boost is literally a boost. It will turn your ramp into a booster, so you will send people flying. Think of it like booster ramps. Pretty self-explanatory. Below that we've got texture. So let's grab this ground plane. Texture, we can actually change it from a bunch of different textures. I'll let you guys explore them in your own time. I'm just going to change my ground plane to dirt. You can see now that we have dirt going on in here. You know, I might just create a bit more of a playable area. Ooh. All right. All right, so let's go ahead back to our ramp and change the direction of it. So to change our direction, we use what's called the direction slider, which is just down over here. I did forget to say there is the color swatch, okay? This color swatch here will change the color of whatever object you have selected, okay? Be aware though, I strongly encourage that you come up with a color palette for your map before you start creating it, all right? Because you cannot copy and paste this color value into another object's color value unless it's fixed, which I doubt. Yep, no, you can't, which means that it's really hard to match exact colors. So I always recommend creating your colors at the very start of creating your map before you go ahead. All right, so I keep getting sidetracked. Direction of the ramp. Arrows pointing to the right currently. We want it pointing to the left so that it goes from the bottom right here up to the left. So if I go to direction, you can see as I start sliding it, the arrow is actually, let's get to a bit of angle. The arrow is changing the direction of the top of the ramp. So I want it facing this way or pointing that way so that the ramp is going up to this part of my map. And what I am going to do is, because as you saw before, you know, we've got this hideous kind of bottom part of the ramp that we don't want it to glitch out at, unless of course you can work that into your map somehow, which you most certainly can. What I am going to do is I'm just going to square that off by creating another cube and just kind of blocking off the hideous looking kind of under part of the ramp. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this block here, I'm going to duplicate it, bring it across, scale it down, make sure it's going to fit nice, and I'm just going to make sure that it is flush up against the side of my ramp. Like so. Now if I go and test it, so we've changed the angle of the ramp, I'm just going to change it to dirt. All right, we've changed the angle of the ramp so it's going up. We've just kind of blocked away that underneath area of the ramp. So now if I go ahead and test it, you can see now we have a ramp inside of our editor. And it works exactly how we expect. So that's pretty much it for the ramp. Let's go ahead now and take a look at the ladder. So the ladder is kind of the same concept, except the arrow needs to face the opposite direction. Go figure. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the ladder, create a ladder. Now you can see the arrow is facing outwards, okay? We need to position the ladder very, very specifically. So I'm going to grab the ladder and I'm going to push it into the wall, okay? Now it needs to sit halfway into the wall, like so. So this one you can crash in, halfway in. Then we can go ahead and we can scale it up to our desired height. And the arrow for the ladder needs to face outwards. So the arrow faces the direction that we want the player to be able to use it from. So if I faced it in, we wouldn't be able to use the arrow, but because we have the player coming in from the right here, and we want them to use the arrow, the ladder, we have the arrow facing out. Okay, now it's the exact same concept if we want to change the direction of the ladder, but we also have to scale it as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate that ladder. I'm going to bring him, and I'm going to put him on this left-hand side over here. Now, before we actually crash him into the wall, we do need to scale it to the correct size. So I'm going to select the ladder, and instead of manually scaling it, I'm going to come down to the scale menu here, and I'm going to change the x-axis and the y-axis values around. I'm going to swap them around. So I'm going to change this one to 4 and the other one to 2. Now it's the exact same size as this one, but it's just kind of facing the right direction. I'm going to crash that halfway into the wall, and we need the arrow to face out. So I'm going to grab the direction until the arrow is facing the right way. So now if we go ahead and test our map, we have usable ladders which we can go up and down with, and a ramp. All right, let's go ahead now and take a look at the map config again. So I'm just bouncing up to here, and we're going to just kind of dive through these lights. So ambient light is the overall light that affects your entire scene. So it's, think of it like the shadows. It's light that'll be in the shadows. It's a consistent light across your entire scene. So if I go here and grab it and I select red and I move it, you can see pretty much the entire environment is changing red, but I don't want it to be red. I want it to be blue. I'm going to pick something more natural, so I'm going to go for a blue. I'm going to introduce some blues. Let's say it's a pretty cold environment. Next thing I want to do is I like to work with ambient and light color at the same time. So I'm going to come in and work in the light color. I'm going to go for a kind of a warmer sun. So it's kind of going to counteract the cool a little bit, but the shadows will still remain kind of that bluish cool color. So light color, I'll just do something kind of crazy to explain. You see how it's affecting just a certain, basically just what the sunlight is hitting in your scene. Okay, come back down, grab a warm color like so. All right, sky color, pretty self-explanatory. If I look up into the sky, grab it, move it around, you can see we can change our sky color to whatever we want. Now last but not least, we have fog color and fog distance. Now it's a little bit kind of hard to explain because we have such a small map. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to scale this guy out like so. And I'm going to create a few little cubes just to explain the distance. So if the fog value is set to high, so the higher it is, the least foggy it's going to be. The lower it is, the denser the fog is going to be essentially. So let's go ahead and just create a couple more. All right, so let's go ahead and give our fog a kind of a bluish tinge to it, and let's go ahead and crank up the fog. Oh, sorry, we're going to lower it because we want a higher density. It's a little bit kind of counterintuitive, right? We want, think of it like the lower it is, the less visibility we have. The higher it is, the more visibility we have. Dense, not dense. So I'm going to drop that down to about 500. All right, cool. So that's it for the light. Let's go ahead and test it. And the fog. You can see we have a bit of fog now affecting our scene. All right, so that is it for the basics of the map editor. You know what, I am going to show you guys one more little thing that you can do real quick, is we can change a bit of a slider. Now, this may get removed soon, so what I'm about to say might eventually become useless. But if we come ahead and select our object, so let's go ahead and select this cube here, there is one option under the object config. It is called ambient. It basically creates a fake shadow from the bottom of the object fading upwards. So if I go ahead and decrease that, you can see it's basically giving a bit of a grounding or contact shadow to my environment. So I'm going to go ahead and do it to a couple of them, and I will do one without it because it can look a little bit weird if it's not consistent, and I'll just show you what I mean by not consistent. So I've created that cube like so. I'm going to go ahead and test the map. Okay, so there we go. So you can see it's kind of added a bit of a fake shadow at the bottom and it fades to the top. This one doesn't have it, but that one does have it, and you can see it kind of creates a bit of a weird shadowy shadow effect between the two objects, so it can be a little bit difficult to keep consistent inside of your map. Alright, well I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Hopefully that's more than enough to get you going in creating your first map. Cheers.